Let's look at some Disney princess spectrograms. So the first one is Someday My Prince Will Come from Snow White. And here's that spectrogram. I decided to change the color scheme, where I think this is called magma. But what I want you to notice is how like smooth everything is. We don't have a lot of like harsh lines, and we've got smooth onsets. You can see some like really nice vibratos. We've got both string and like vocal vibratos going on in here. And all of the onsets are very like smooth. Next one chronologically is Once Upon a Dream from Sleeping Beauty. This is what it looks like overall, and we kind of see some similar things. I'm going to zoom in here where we have like some good vibratos, and we have like spaciousness happening in these bands of overtones. And you'll notice that there are these like vertical lines. That is where people are talking. So especially like right here, this is where Philip appears, and he is talking back and forth with Aurora. This is probably where like consonants are happening.
I know you, I walk with you once upon a dream.
So both of those feature strings and like woodwinds, so we have like pure sounds, which is really why we get a lot of space in between those bands of overtone. The next one chronologically I have is Part of Your World from The Little Mermaid, and this has a little bit thicker instrumentation. So you can see just like from a very zoomed out view, this is Part of Your World, and then this is Someday My Prince Will Come. So you'll just notice overall how much thicker it is. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit, where like we still have some clear vibratos, but there's a little bit like more thickness happening here versus if I look here. I'm not doing a very good scientific comparison here. Like there are settings I could play with and other things I could look at, but just like eyeballing it, you can see that there's just like more happening up here as well. There are like more overtones that are present. And then she does talk a lot in it, and there's like some whispering and just like a lot of like noises happening. And then at the end is where I was talking about Lindman's observation that the princesses, like their I Want songs fade to a prayer at the end, and this is where it fades to a prayer. So you can tell like where she stops singing, because we have like the vibrato here, and then that stops here at the end, and then we do get this build up at the very end, but there's not vibrato in it because she's not singing anymore. So this is actually where the horns start coming in, and then we start to get this like bigger, thicker texture at the end. So she's So she stopped singing somewhere in here, I think is where she faded out. So you can see, like if I kind of zoom in, you can kind of see like a little vibrato happening there, and then we get the horns coming in, and that's where you see this like growth happening. This is just around the river bend, and what you'll notice from a distance is that it's much fuller looking than the other ones, and then we have a lot more of these vertical stripes. And if you hadn't listened to it, you might think, oh, there must be like a lot of percussion or things with heavy onsets on there. But what I think is happening here is that she's just enunciating her consonants a lot more, so we're getting this like spike, and especially in higher level energy. That's what consonants like look like on a spectrogram, is there a bunch of like high frequency noise, so we get all of these. Like right here, that would be just, and then there are a lot of S's where all of these were, so that's what these like big spikes are, these vertical lines. But zooming in, you also have like her nice vibrato there, and you notice like there's a lot more thickness to the orchestration, just like instrumentally as well. We do have like horns and some percussion happening in this. Did you hear the horn in that? The like doo doo at the end of that snippet I just played. But again, like the other princesses in their I Want song, it does fade to a whisper at the end. So we have like all of this really like saturated color, which is like there's more energy happening here, there's more of these frequencies happening, and then at the end that all fades out. And again, she's like good at enunciating her consonants here. But this at the end here is where she's kind of like whispering to herself, like, oh, what should I do? Like, should I marry Kocoum? And we still have that fade out at the end, but a little bit of a thicker texture as far as like the princesses go that we've talked about so far, and like the princesses that we've had so far chronologically in Disney music. But I want to switch to Hunchback of Notre Dame. Here's out there. So again, like you can see, compared to like Pocahontas, again we've like got very thick stuff happening. A lot of saturation through the whole thing. It kind of just looks loud through the entire thing, and then instead of fading out at the end, it actually is probably like the loudest and the biggest that we have in the entire song. Think of this whole song as like building up to that end point, where the Disney princess songs kind of had more of a smooth curve where they start out soft and then get bigger and then go softer. And again, Lin-Min explains that this is like cultural communication of how like women were viewed during the times that these movies were made. If we trace the timbre differences between the men protagonists and the women protagonists, we can see this stark difference in just like the shape of the timbre and what instruments are used. But that changes with Princess and the Frog, which came out in 2009. Here's almost there from Princess and the Frog, and you'll see it ends very big, just like Hunchback of Notre Dame. We do have a lot of spaciousness, and you'll see that like there's a lot of these vertical lines here because this is actually more percussive, and we have like much stronger onsets for each of the instruments that are here.
Almost there. People down here think I'm crazy, but I don't care.
So what you're seeing as these lines are probably a combination of the drums and the bass, and then probably her consonants as well. And then we have a big finish.
Climb the mountain, I cross the river, and I'm almost there. I'm almost there.
So that's refreshing, a princess with a strong finish to their I Want song. I do want to show Tangled as well because it is my favorite movie. I do have a tattoo. This is When Will My Life Begin, and you see that there are even more of these vertical, like there are so many vertical lines here. That's because this is the guitar being plucked, so that's a very strong onset. You would see something like this from a piano as well, and you can see it especially in the beginning. It's just like the very iconic guitar strum that makes me cry the moment I hear it. So then, like you can see, so this is the guitar strumming, and then this is where like the bass and drum kit come in. But you'll see at the very end we do have that whole ending with a whispered prayer thing going on. This came out in 2012, so that's 3 years after Princess and the Frog, so we kind of took a step forward where Tiana gets to have this like big finish, but then we went back to like the normal ending with a whispered prayer, like, oh, maybe I'll get to have this thing, maybe this thing will happen to me. But also of note is that we had two different composer teams working on each movie. So Randy Newman did the music for Princess and the Frog, and then Alan Menken and Glenn Slater did the music and lyrics for Tangled. Since Alan Menken had done all of the other had done most of the other Disney princesses to that point as well, it makes sense that he would continue to do what worked. The movie that Oliver Lindemann points out is breaking that like stereotype of the Disney princess and moving us into a new era, the eclectic era. That would be Frozen. And then Anna's I Want song is for the first time in forever, which Elsa also has like some singing parts. That looks like this overall. So again, like it's very thickly orchestrated. It's also very long. I think it's the longest example I have here, but you'll see that we have a big finish at the end. We don't have this like fading out at the end, so it may not be like as big of a crescendo at the end as we have in Hunchback of Notre Dame out there, but it does have a big finish.
Cause for the first time in forever, for the first time in forever, nothing's in my way.
Very big, brassy, percussive finish. Which Tiana's I Want song was also kind of like that, but this is like fully orchestrated, and Tiana's was more of like a Dixieland band. But so we can definitely see a stark difference just by looking at the spectrograms and using our ears to hear timbrally between the early Disney princesses and the kinds of values that were valued in women back then, or were like seen as okay, which was like, oh, you need to be feminine and like quiet and sing light and operatically, versus where we have like Tiana and Anna like belting their hearts out and being supported by like bigger, more percussive, and maybe like more masculine instruments. But I kind of want to get rid of those terms anyways. One final one that I wanted to look at that I thought was really interesting is How Far I'll Go from Moana. Again, you'll see a bunch of these vertical lines, so just like in Tangled, most of these are from the instruments, so we've got like some guitar, and then in the beginning we actually have like a string section playing staccato. They're not plucking, but they are like playing staccato at the beginning. And it does have a crescendo at the end here. It comes from like, you can see there's a moment of quiet, and then we just have a big crescendo. I'm gonna skip ahead because this is long, but we do have a big finish here. I'll start here. Big finish. So the more recent princesses tend to have more of a big finish in their I Want songs, and you can actually see that on the spectrogram. So that's like one timbre thing. Or you could also think of that as dynamics. You could think of the dynamics of the song, but also one thing that you can see in the spectrogram that you don't really get from just like talking about dynamics is like how many instruments are also involved at the ends of these. And for the ones that have the big finish, they have more instruments involved, so the whole texture is just like thicker. Like you see more saturated color in the spectrogram than you do for princesses, where it like fades out at the end. The other big difference or development over the course of like the Disney princess chronology is the smoothness of the spectrum. Looking again back at Someday My Prince Will Come, it's very smooth. Like we do have these vertical lines where there are consonants and stuff happening in the voice, and compared to like all the percussiveness and like the guitar strumming, and like there's just a lot more vertical lines in Tangled and Princess and the Frog and How Far I'll Go. So one thing that becomes like more acceptable to have accompanying Disney princesses are these are instruments that have a harsher or less smooth onset to them. So their envelope is a little bit more like sudden, and those convey cultural values. So thanks again for asking to see all the Disney princesses spectrograms. I'm definitely not like a timbre expert, but it was really fun to dig into these. And I was using Sonic Visualizer, which is free and open source, so you can download. It's just sonicvisualizer.org, spelled with the S because it's from the Queen's Mary College of London, I think it's called. And if you want to make your own spectrograms, you just open it up here. So here's an empty one I just opened, and then you'll go to File, and then Open, and then I'm just gonna pick, I'll do Almost There, and then it'll pop up this waveform. And if you want the spectrogram, you can go to Layer, and then Add Spectrogram, and I've been doing channels mixed together, so you get this, and you can change the colors up here. I really like the Magma one. I think it's easiest for me to see the saturation. There's a ton of other things that you can play with in it. There's a ton of plugins as well, and it's free and open source, so have fun. And you'll notice that we didn't look at sheet music here, but we did a lot of like really interesting music analysis by just looking at these spectrograms. So have at it.